Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Master of Ceremonies, Zainab Badawi. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Master of Ceremonies, Zainab Badawi.
I think they should say Mistress of Ceremonies. President Alassane Ouattara, I think they should say Mistress of Ceremonies. President Alassane Ouattara, Your Excellency, thank you very much indeed for welcoming us to your beautiful country and your lovely people, all the other excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. It is my pleasure to welcome you to your lovely people, all the other excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Ibrahim Foundation's Leadership Ceremony. I'm Zainab Badawi, your host for this evening, as we open the 2019 Ibrahim Governance Weekend. I'm Zainab Badawi, your host for this evening, as we open the 2019 Ibrahim Governance Weekend. This event is, of course, an opportunity to celebrate progress on African leadership and governance, and it's wonderful to be joined by so many friends of the Foundation. But our gathering this year is tinged too with the knowledge of African leadership and governance, and it's wonderful to be joined by so many friends of the Foundation. But our gathering this year is tinged too with the knowledge of an absence, a great absence, because tonight we pay tribute to one of Africa's greatest sons and leaders and global statesmen, and a personal friend to many of us, Kofi Annan. Tonight we pay tribute to one of Africa's greatest sons and leaders and global statesmen, and a personal friend to many of us, Kofi Annan. And we're really delighted to hear tonight from his family and some of his closest friends and colleagues who will share their own memories of him. And before we do that, I'd just like to share my own recollection from his family and some of his closest friends and colleagues who will share their own memories of him. And before we do that, I'd just like to share my own recollection with Kofi Annan. I remember when he first became Secretary General of the United Nations in 1997, invited to Oxford to listen to him speak. And he spoke with such a whisper that we were all leaning forward and thinking, and I thought, is this the great Secretary General of the United Nations in 1997, invited to Oxford to listen to him speak? And he spoke with such a whisper that we were all leaning forward and thinking, and I thought, is this the great man? I can barely hear him. And after a minute or so, you're just mesmerized by his voice, his presence. And I realized you didn't have to have that tub-thumping, roller coaster oratorical skills in order to make impact. And after a minute or so, you're just mesmerized by his voice, his presence. And I realized you didn't have to have that tub-thumping, roller coaster oratorical skills in order to make impact. And also, it was my greatest pleasure. I didn't realize, of course, at the time that exactly this time last year.
أنا فرحان أن أتعرف به في السنة الماضية كنت في جنيف كنت
greatest pleasure. I didn't realize, of course, at the time that exactly this time last year I was in Geneva hosting his 80th birthday as well as the 10th anniversary of his foundation.
Eu estava
ضيوف للمقابلة الأخيرة الذي قبل وفاته شارك معنا حياته وخبرته.
na Genebra e eu era convidada para o aniversário da sua fundação. Eu ainda lembro da última entrevista que eu tive com o senhor Kofi
يعني قضى أكثر من 50 سنة مع الأمم المتحدة. كان يحب يعني الدفاع
discutindo da sua carreira e ele passou 5 décadas nas Nações Unidas e era uma pessoa muito humana, humanitária, e ele falou de uma anedota que eu lembro.
عندما كان في الأمم المتحدة أحد السفراء يعني في قال له يعني سيد الرئيس سيد الأمين العام لماذا لا تسوي.
Vou contar agora que durante a sua carreira nos Estados Unidos é um embaixador num país membro permanente das Nações Unidas o interpelou perguntando por que o senhor não podia resolver o problema do Iraque e diz que Deus criou a terra em 7 dias. Aí o senhor Kofi Annan respondeu que Deus tem uma vantagem única porque ele trabalha sozinho. E o senhor Kofi Annan era uma pessoa muito magnífica que não levava, não tinha uma ideia muito séria, né? Apesar de trabalhar com muita seriedade. E ele dizia que o problema da África era uma questão de liderança. E é isso justamente que a Fundação Ibrahim procura fazer. Falamos muito do trabalho da migração e nós devemos investir na nossa juventude, essa juventude valente que decide viajar para trabalhar. E eu lembro que até quando estava doente, o senhor Kofi Annan procurava trabalhar para a África. E eu acho que a Fundação Ibrahim vai trabalhar nesse sentido, procurar ideias e iniciativas para poder levar essa questão mais adiante. Estamos aqui com a iniciativa de uma única pessoa, o Dr. Ibrahim,
I've had the pleasure of attending many Ibrahim governance weekends, and every year this special gathering brings together so many minds and such energy, giving us a moment to pause in our busy lives, take stock and just discuss and mull over progress in Africa and how we can really improve life there for all the people of the continent.
para
So I'm
trabalharem
delighted to
juntos para
welcome onto the
garantir
stage
a
the man
evolução
behind
da
all this.
África e
Mo,
melhorar
come up and join
a
me.
vida dos africanos. Eu estou muito feliz de estar aqui e eu convido aqui o senhor que organizou toda essa manifestação.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and
Senhoras e
sisters,
senhores,
welcome to
caros
Abidjan.
irmãos,
It is wonderful to
caras
have
irmãs, sejam
you here
bem-vindos
with
na
us,
Côte d'Ivoire.
tonight.
É maravilhoso
But let me start
tê-los
by
aqui
expressing
conosco
our gratitude
nesta noite.
to our
Deixam-me, por
host,
favor,
His
expressar a minha
Excellency,
gratidão
President Al-Hassan
aos nossos anfitriões,
for
o presidente
the
Alassane
wonderful
Ouattara,
warm reception
Sua
of the
Excelência,
President, his
aqui
government,
presente.
and above all,
Agradeço
the people
a calorosa acolhida.
of Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you very much.
Agradeço também
العراق قال كوفي يا سيدي يعني الله عنده يعني يعمل وحيدا نحن نعمل سويا كل ما قال أن يقول يحب الدفاع وكان أن القيادة فلا بد أن يكون القادات على خدمة الناس المؤسسة ولجنة مو إبراهيم تعمل يعني إبراز كل ما يتعلق بالهجرة، فلا بد أن نستثمر في شبابنا والذي يقرر أن يسافر لكي يعمل. هذا كان يعني كان مريضا ولكن كان يحاول أن يعمل لأجل إفريقيا. نحن نعمل يعني أن نتكلم، أن نتبادل، أن نشارك يعني الأفكار. نحن هنا اليوم مع مبادرة يعني الدكتور مو إبراهيم الذي مهمته هي يعني أن يساعد القارة، وخاصة بالنسبة لي
of attending many Ibrahim governance weekends, and every year this special gathering brings together so many minds and such energy, giving us a moment to pause in our busy lives, take stock and just discuss and mull over progress in Africa and how we
فرصة
can really
لالتقاء
improve life
جميع
there for all the people of
الناس
the continent.
من
So I'm delighted to welcome to the
وأيضا
stage the man behind all
تعمل
this.
المؤسسة
Mo, come up
لتحسين
and join me.
حياة الناس في إفريقيا. فلا بد أريد أن أدعو يعني السيد مو إبراهيم.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, welcome to of our foundation and
cumprimentar também os meus colegas da fundação e os colegas do comitê de organização e do comitê BRIS. Convido-os
الذين في هذه اللجنة المؤسسة وفي اللجنة الموجودة في غريس.
I also would like to honor and
eu gostaria também de homenagear
welcome our laureates. We have 5.
لنراكم.
I also would like to honor and really ask you to welcome our laureates. We have 5 African presidents who proved to be wonderful and role model for Africa, and they are all here actually.
Eu gostaria de homenagear também os nossos
who proved to be wonderful and role model for Africa, and they are all here actually. Can you please?
pessoas que serão premiadas.
Thank you, President Moha, President Rossat Mokai, Pedro Perez, and President
Nós
Chissano.
temos aqui muitas pessoas, o presidente Chissano, a senhora.
Thank you, President Moha, President Rossat Mokai, Pedro Perez, and President Chissano, and President Madam Ellen Sirleaf. Thank you for
Johnson Sirleaf. Agradeço muito a vossa presença aqui conosco e agradeço também todo o trabalho que fizeram para o seu país e para a África. Nós esperamos
what you have
شكرا
done
لكونكم معنا وشكرا لكم
We
على
hope
ما
to
فعلتم
see more of you, and I
لدولتكم.
hope sometime
agradecê-los pelo trabalho que fizeram e pelo qual são premiados.
the legacy
E essa noite nós vamos celebrar, homenagear.
we're celebrating. This is not a way.
Nós vamos aqui homenagear
Have music, we will have fun, because we are
africano excepcional.
having coffee in our
Aqui nós não estamos fazendo,
so no handkerchiefs.
lastimando a morte do Kofi Annan, mas queremos dar uma homenagem a esse grande homem. Então não precisamos ficar
What we also enjoy
os nossos irmãos, as nossas irmãs das Nações Unidas, de continuar as reformas que o senhor Kofi Annan initiou.
Donc, ce que nous avons profité de lui, c'est le travail de Kofi lorsqu'il sort de son bureau. Après, je dis aux gens que après les bureaux, ayez une vie. Mais
nós gostaríamos aqui de falar da vida do senhor Kofi Annan quando ele saiu das Nações Unidas. Eu sempre convido as pessoas para ter uma outra vida depois
il sort de son travail, il allait créer sa fondation dans son pays afin de pouvoir établir tout ce qui est paix. Donc,
o trabalho. Mas o senhor Kofi Annan, quando saiu das Nações Unidas, voltou para o seu país e criou a sua fundação para continuar a implementar as suas iniciativas.
going to Myanmar to
Evidentemente, quando nós trabalhamos,
work out
vous essayez de travailler
forward, and I think it works.
afin de pouvoir faire avancer les choses.
It's not perfect, but we move
Donc,
forward.
il n'y a pas pour l'instant de bénéfices très pertinents, mais quand même, nous évoluons.
You know, Libya,
estamos em vida, não percebemos o fruto do nosso trabalho. Nós viajamos muito, vamos para a Líbia e a Líbia faz parte dos países dos quais nós afastamos.
Donc, lorsque nous allons en Libye, en Syrie, c'est vrai,
Syria, because it's covered, there's no partners there.
on s'éloigne tous de ces pays. Mais lui, il travaillait dans ces pays-là.
We are very grateful.
Donc, nous sommes vraiment très reconnaissants parce
Kofi Annan trabalhava com esses países e nós estamos muito gratos pelo trabalho que fez.
And the integrity of the prize.
E
For that,
o senhor Kofi Annan participou também do
did
que dans notre fondation,
committee and
Kofi aussi a participé à certains de nos travaux dans nos comités. Et il a essayé de participer.
Kofi did with us.
trabalho que nós organizávamos na nossa
Many
fundação.
times I wonder
Participava dos comitês.
Participer à tout ce qui est comité pour pouvoir donner des prix.
what Kofi
Donc, je me demande ce que
is going to make of what's going on in Africa
Kofi
today.
laissera.
Na República na RDC. Eu me pergunto, será que as pessoas aqui têm algum interesse em ver a justiça?
هل في جنوب أفريقيا لهم فائدة ولهم استفادة في أفريقيا الديمقراطية؟
And there's no bus.
Na RDC. E eu vou interpelar aqui representante da RDC.
What Kofi was
Essa situação não pode ser tolerada.
we have Bashir
Nós
and
até nos perguntamos.
نريد أن نخبرهم هذا ليس بجميل.
I wonder what Kofi would think of what is going on in Sudan.
نتساءل
We have Bashir
ماذا
and his
كيف كان
30 years.
O Kofi teria pensado daquilo que está acontecendo no Sudão, com essas pessoas que estão no poder há mais de três décadas e organizando.
يفكر ماذا يجري الآن في السودان. شوف هؤلاء بدالوا على الرئاسة، يعني يدمرون الدولة. هناك مثلا الهروب، الشباب يقتل.
Décadas, guerras e matando as populações. E o Sudão é o único país africano que é dividido.
And Bashir and his gang split our
De
country.
que maneira podemos garantir a reunião desse país?
Africa, which is split.
نحن في السودان الدولة الوحيدة منقسمة.
And Bashir and his gang split.
كيف نجمع بين الجنوب والشمال؟ بشير وأقرانه.
Sudão do Sul e Sudão do Norte. Bashir e os seus homens dividiram o país. estão queimando o país, estão destruindo a economia do país e não querem sair do poder. E nós aqui
هذه الدولة دعامة الاقتصاد ينسحب لا يريد أن يذهبوا نقول له يا سيد بشير
apelamos o senhor
30 عاما كثير جدا ماذا تريد يا سيد بشير منذ 4 أشهر الناس يخرجون
Remercier nos frères et sœurs en Côte d'Ivoire. Et je suis vraiment très fier d'avoir connu Kofi Annan, d'avoir été vraiment si proche de lui. Il a eu un impact dans ma vie. Il est...
De agradecer sinceramente às irmãs e aos irmãos da Côte d'Ivoire. E eu estou muito orgulhoso de ter conhecido Kofi Annan, de ter sido tão próximo.
Just before, in his 80th birthday, before, where is...
Donc,
before you had
où est Zara? Vous avez eu un week-end avant lui. Il est venu en France et il m'a appelé, Mo, j'arrive.
Eu estou muito orgulhoso do impacto positivo que este homem teve na minha vida.
The weekend before, he came to South France. And he called me. I said, Mo, I'm coming to South France. I'm going to come have dinner.
Eu lembro, uma semana antes do seu encontro com a Zinab, ele veio da França e ele me convidou dizendo, Mo, estou chegando, eu gostaria de jantar consigo. Ele me convidou.
I'm going to come have dinner with you.
Donc je vais avoir le déjeuner, le dîner, pardon, avec toi. Et il m'a appelé. Et nous avons eu des amis qui sont venus, nous avons eu un bon moment de dîner. Mo, nous allons venir dans 2 heures. Si le temps est bon, nous allons venir. Mais j'ai oublié de vous dire que...
E nos reunimos com vários amigos e passamos jantar muito bom. E ele sempre me chamava assim, Mo, estamos vindo, se o tempo for bom, nós chegamos daqui a 2 horas. Mas eu gostaria de dizer que somos 9 adultos, 3 crianças e 9 adultos e 7 crianças, 7 jovens e 3 crianças, mas ele era uma pessoa que tinha muito bem humorada. E eu lembro ainda do nosso último encontro em Joanesburgo.
Merci beaucoup, Mo.
Usual typical restraint.
En parlant toujours avec toi, c'est toujours la même
Chose.
Vraiment, c'est
Dessa sessão de trabalho entre a África e a Europa. Muito obrigado.
Usual typical
Obrigado, Mo.
But some very charming anecdotes of
É sempre
très intéressant.
Well, let's recall the life of
Et
Kofi Annan.
bien entendu, on a parlé de la vie de Kofi Annan. Et maintenant, tout cela a été mis dans une vidéo par la fondation Mo Ibrahim.
agradável falar com
The life of Kofi Annan in
o senhor.
images now. In this film that's
Evidentemente, nós falamos da vida de Kofi Annan. E agora vamos assistir ao vídeo.
Le développement sans sécurité. Ni l'un ni l'autre ne peut être maintenu à long terme sans être ancré dans l'état de droit et le respect des droits humains.
Vídeo que a Fundação Mo Ibrahim fez sobre o Kofi Annan.
Without it being rooted in the rule of law and respect for human rights.
Nem o desenvolvimento, nem a segurança podem avançar, nem subsistir por longo tempo sem estarem fundados sobre a lei e o respeito pelos direitos humanos.
Fundamental human rights are a Fundamental human rights are a product of human nature. Indeed, human life itself. In an interdependent world, poverty or oppression anywhere is a threat to prosperity and stability everywhere.
Donc,
Indeed, human life itself.
La vie humaine, la pauvreté en Afrique et la pression est partout. La pauvreté est une menace pour la stabilité partout. En souvenant de Kofi Annan, nous nous souvenons de ses efforts pour l'Afrique. Il a impacté.
Ele teve um papel decisivo na criação do Tribunal Criminal Internacional e o Conselho dos Direitos Humanos.
Tout au long de sa carrière, il est resté un ami honnête. L'Afrique a besoin de dirigeants courageux, persévérants et compatissants qui puiseront dans la vitalité du continent pour créer un avenir meilleur. Nous avons besoin de véritables dirigeants démocratiques qui comprennent qu'ils sont au service des citoyens et non l'inverse.
A justiça pós-conflitos e ajudando a terminar com a impunidade. A África precisa de líderes corajosos, persistentes e compassivos que vão dar uma nova vida.
Les dirigeants doivent comprendre qu'ils détiennent le pouvoir de par la confiance du peuple et qu'il peut aussi leur être retiré. Kofi a dirigé les Nations Unies pendant une période de turbulence.
Après ao continente para criar um futuro melhor. Nós precisamos de verdadeiros líderes democráticos que compreendem que estão ao serviço dos cidadãos. Os líderes devem entender que têm o poder quando o povo confia neles.
Il a consacré sa vie à la justice et à la démocratie. Et à la justice pour
as Nações Unidas durante tempos difíceis. Ele dedicou a sua vida à justiça e à democracia, justiça para as vítimas da violência e perseguição em África e em todo o lado. Ele preocupou-se com a democracia em África e a integridade das eleições africanas. Nós realmente apreciamos isso. Ele continua o seu trabalho, pois é o chefe dos anciãos.
In the foundation, Kofi led the prize committee and he laid down the foundation of its credibility and integrity. And for that, we are really grateful. What I admired most about Kofi was his unruffled approach, his thoughtful approach to issues, and his sense of humor. He was really cool.
We must allow African youth to lead us into the future with enlightened modernity rooted in African values. Young people have lots of knowledge, know a lot about technology. You have the capacity to do it.
Mr. Annan's mission and vision for Africa and for the world obviously inspired so many young Africans.
He opened my eyes for the first time to how far and promising the way could be for Africans.
My very first memories of the United Nations were those that included a person of color, an African.
He inspired me growing up to be interested in serving not only my country, but also Africa as a whole.
It's amazing to think that me, an African, like he would have been at my age, can make all the change that we hope to make. That you can join a huge global organization and rise to the top and lead it successfully.
Kofi Annan é líder que deixa legados para as Nações Unidas e também para o mundo inteiro.
He was a person full of compassion and empathy for all kind of people, irrespective of their age, race or social status.
Kofi Annan nous a laissé comme héritage le courage de croire que c'est possible, de défendre nos convictions et de prôner la paix, l'égalité partout dans le monde.
He speaks about the importance to act that each tomorrow finds us farther than today. And this is something that I've been living with, because I think that it's important that each one of us do everything in their capacity to ensure that tomorrow is a better day.
Je suis reconnaissante à Kofi Annan.
I'm very grateful to Kofi Annan for allowing us to have this ability to dare dream and do what we can do.
And I think we owe a lot to him, and we should strive to ensure that we continue what he started.
I think as that video clearly shows, Kofi Annan in Africa and all over the world, his legacy will be remembered. The world does still and always will. I think we can all agree that was a fitting tribute to Kofi Annan, especially hearing the comments from young people, because of course he was a great inspiration to the young of Africa. And of course, in his 5 decades at the United Nations, he occupied just about every senior role at the organization. And some Africans have followed in his footsteps, and one of the women, African women, who has reached a very high pinnacle at the UN is, of course, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed. Amina, come on the stage. She's also former Nigerian cabinet minister in 3 administrations, no less. That takes some doing. Well done, yeah. Your thoughts and reflections, thank you.
Thank you very much, Zainab. Your Excellency, President Al-Hassan Ouattara, our former heads of state are here, our Ibrahim laureates, the honorable ministers, our Mo Ibrahim Foundation members, colleagues, friends, brothers and sisters, and let me say future leaders today. Dear Mo, thank you so much for convening this event and giving us a reason to gather such an amazing group of leaders and young people from across Africa and the world. Many friends here today, I really am honored to join you at the world-renowned governance forum that we have annually. And I can think of no better place that we would do honor and special tribute to Kofi Annan. The film we've just seen captures Kofi in all his multifaceted glory. The diplomat, the mentor, the quietly forceful speaker, and the compassionate human being. It's hard to pick from among the highlights, but I was especially struck by the young woman who said Kofi had opened her eyes for the first time to how far and promising the way could be for an African. And that is a standard to which we should all aspire. Mo, I know Kofi was your guest at the Governance Weekend 2 years ago, and that he contributed greatly to the work of the Foundation and the Prize Committee. He was, as you once said upon his passing last August, a comrade in arms in the fight for better governance and the rule of law in Africa. Thank you for bringing us all together in his honor tonight and for focusing this weekend on some of the key challenges that engage Kofi through his life journey: youth, migration, and leadership. We're privileged to have Kojo here, his son, with us, Kojo, and cherished members of the Annan family. Let me express once again our condolences on your loss, which is also so painfully the UN's and the world at large. But let me also send our regards to Nan. I know that we expected for her to be here, and I was with her 3 weeks ago in Geneva. We had lunch, and we went into a restaurant she said was their favorite, and then we sat down to look at the menu, and both of us didn't know what to choose, and so she said, maybe we should just eat what Kofi would have eaten, and so we ate his fish. Kojo, you saw the outpouring love and the admiration last September at the memorial ceremony we held at the United Nations in New York. The GA hall was filled to capacity with people, but most importantly with shared memories. And in the days that followed, as world leaders took the podium for the annual general debate, leader after leader voiced their sadness in his passing, their appreciation for his enormous achievements, and their high regard for his service to the world, and inspiration to us all. Kojo, thank you again, and the family, for continuing to sustain Kofi's legacy through the Kofi Annan Foundation. For the UN, Kofi was the right person at the right time. We all recall the turmoil of the immediate post-Cold War period. But the end of the ideological rivalry between superpowers also created a renewed sense of opportunity for what our organization could do and be for the world's people, and Kofi grabbed that moment with gusto. He set many initiatives in motion, understanding that governments cannot by themselves address today's enormous challenges. He opened the doors of the United Nations to new partners from the private sector, and that gave birth to the UN Global Compact, to civil society, to the academic and philanthropic communities. Strongly committed to human dignity, he supported the establishment of the International Criminal Court and nurtured what became the breakthrough concept for the responsibility to protect people from grave violations of human rights. And as a firm believer in multilateral action, he pushed the organization to tackle big challenges such as HIV and AIDS. With these steps and so much more, the UN became a hub of dynamism and hope embodied by Kofi himself. And even when the international community failed or fell short, he did not hesitate to reflect and to admit what went wrong and how we could course correct in order to fortify the UN for the future. For me, Kofi was a touchstone, a guide, an inspiration as an African and as a person of the world. In a very real sense, one can draw a straight line from his tenure as Secretary General and the role that I have the honor to fulfill today. The articulation of the 8 Millennium Development Goals, yet another breakthrough, occurred on Kofi's watch under his close direction. The goals, born out of the decades on health and education and water, became a rallying point for the development community and a framework that produced tangible improvements in millions and millions of people's lives. We have the honor too today to see Mark Malloch Brown, who was his companion in that journey as they shepherded the MDGs. I also worked on the goals in Nigeria, including on education and other aspects. Eventually, one thing led to another, and I ended up having the privilege of serving Kofi's successor as Deputy Secretary General, working with member states around the world to shape the 2030 agenda, including the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In my current role as Deputy Secretary General to Antonio Guterres, I spend my days pressing for the implementation of these amazing goals. And I often feel the spirit of Kofi looking over my shoulder and urging me on, but reminding me not to forget the unfinished business of the first 6 goals, the MDGs. He understood the mutually reinforcing relationship between peace, development, and human rights. And the 2030 Agenda is indeed the heir of the vision that animated so much of Kofi's work as the Secretary General. Even after his retirement from the UN, he did not finish his service to the world. He did not retire from retirement, a joke he and his dear friend Madiba laughed about amongst themselves. His expertise and deep knowledge of networks were leveraged and deployed for mediating conflicts around the globe in Kenya and Syria and Myanmar. In his last outing, he spoke to young children in Zimbabwe and marched in South Africa. He went where he was needed, and everywhere he went, he brought solutions, he brought hope with him. Kofi's wisdom and counsel were sought out constantly until the very end. I've been touched on Kofi's substantive contributions, but let me say a word about Kofi the person. He was courageous, he was kind, mostly he was humble and humorous. It was said often that Kofi knew everyone by virtue of his long career and many postings, including in human resources. Many are the staff members who can recall an unexpected telephone call asking of their well-being or that of their family. Many are the staff members who remember meetings of which opinions from all were welcome, regardless of the level at which they were working. But whether or not one knew Kofi personally, a distinct bond encompassed all, forged by his awareness, and unique amongst Secretary Generals, I can tell you, of staff aspirations, their frustrations, and responsibilities. As Secretary General Guterres said at Kofi's funeral in Ghana, Kofi Annan was the United Nations and the United Nations was him. Friends, a world today needs more leaders like Kofi Annan. We're living through a period in which we find our core values and our multilateral foundations under threat. Inequality is certainly on the rise among and especially within countries. Trust in political establishments is on the decline. Intolerance, extremism, and virulent nationalisms are increasingly widespread. People are nervous about jobs and about the prospects of their children's future. Kofi's example can inspire us as we seek to meet these challenges, especially in our mother Africa. He had a special affection for young people, as we saw, recognizing the duty not only to leave the world a better place for them, but actually to build that future with them now. Wherever he traveled, he would be sure to visit universities and schools, young activists and entrepreneurs, and encourage them in their studies and their struggles and aspirations. Let us carry on this legacy by doing far more to advance the well-being of youth in Africa and across the world, at a time when jobs and hope itself may be in such short supply. He also had a bond with the world's migrants and refugees. Being a migrant himself and having worked at the UN Refugee Agency, his approach, like that of Secretary General Guterres today, was based on one word: solidarity. Africa today shows remarkable generosity in hosting a third of the world's refugees and internally displaced persons. Indeed, the continent steps up far more than others do in many regions, where borders are often closed or the climate is distinctly hostile. At a time when there are more people on the move than ever before in search of safety, opportunity, let us take our cue from Kofi, and by assisting the vulnerable, recognizing the benefits of migration, and upholding human rights, all while addressing the challenges and getting to the root causes of human displacement. Kofi was also insistent on the responsibilities of leaders to humbly serve their people and to make way peacefully, democratically, for their successors at the end of their terms. This is the way that societies, again, in and beyond Africa, can build stability, trust, resilience, cohesion, and strong institutions that meet the needs of their people. Kofi spoke this truth repeatedly and fearlessly. Ladies and gentlemen, Kofi Annan was a champion of peace, and people right up to the end, and including through various troubleshooting assignments and his work for the elders. This proud son of Africa left a lasting imprint on the world. He left us enriched, and sadly, he left us too soon. I hope that we will all continue to be inspired by his example as we build on his contributions and carry his vision forward in the conversations that we will have this weekend and in many weekends to come. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Amina, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, for those reflections there. Well, Kofi Annan was once described as a friend to thousands and a leader to millions, and one person who had a very, very personal perspective on Kofi Annan is, of course, his son, mentioned by Amina there, Kojo. Kojo, do come up and speak on behalf of the family. Thank you. And renewed condolences, of course, on behalf of everybody.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It's a privilege for me to be here today with you in Abidjan, paying tribute to my father as Mo Ibrahim launches the Ibrahim Governance Weekend for 2019. Mo was a good friend of my late father and a man for whom my father had immense respect. They shared similar values and beliefs, respect people everywhere, and they go all about all they do with grace and humility. At the Mo Ibrahim Governance Weekend a few years ago, my father was one of the guests of honor, and it was his birthday during the weekend. So I recall they sang happy birthday to him led by a relatively unknown musician called Bono. He would have been actually 81 this coming Monday, 8th of April. I'd just like to say that the tribute video that the Ibrahim Foundation put together earlier was very moving for me, and I'm sure if Nan and my sister had been here, Nan sends her regrets because she's had to take care of her mother. They would have been just as touched as I was by the lovely video. Amina's speech as well, incredible, and Mo's speech really touching for us and the family. Many won't know that when my father first ran for Secretary General late in 1996, the French government initially vetoed his candidacy at the Security Council of the UN on the basis that they primarily wanted a Francophone and possibly even an Ivorian, Amara Essi. They also mainly doubted my father's capacity to engage and speak in French. Sans l'ombre d'un doute,
without a shadow of a doubt, they didn't know that among his friends, the closest collaborators were in fact personalities from the Francophone world, from Lomé to Cotonou all the way to Abidjan and Dakar. Allow me to pay tribute to the professional relations, but also warm, friendly relations that my father and Madame Nan Anan shared with the distinguished President of Côte d'Ivoire, His Excellency Mr. Alassane Ouattara, and the First Lady, Mrs. Dominique Ouattara. For Kofi Annan, the language of Molière was something that he was well versed in, and he taught me and my sisters and also my brother TJ to practice with comfort that similar of that of a Parisian.
As Secretary General, the French were amongst my father's strongest supporters, and years later awarded him with the Légion d'honneur, the highest title in their land. I tell this little story to show the remarkable capacity he had to turn a perceived weakness into a strength, a skill and trait that we can all learn from. Those who know me know that I like to use sporting analogies because I believe they contain many rich lessons and can be applied beyond the field and into many different sectors. Sports doesn't see color or religion or tribe. It is truly meritocratic. It only sees greatness. Sports an order of chivalry, a code of ethics and aesthetics, recruiting its members from all classes and all peoples. Sport is education, the truest form of education, that of character. To win, you have to be the best, and my dad was indeed a winner, a world champion, an Africa 10. He represented integrity and he represented dignity. He represented excellence and he represented unity. He combined passion with self-discipline, skill with determination, and faced any defeat with unbending resilience. Excellence is about waking up every morning and getting it done. Performance under pressure. Excellence is formed by repetition. The countless hours of practice you are ready to go before you're ready to go onto the world stage. He raised the standards of those on his team because his own personal bar was so high. Kofi Annan was a great Africa 10 champion. Mandela was a great Africa 10 champion. We have a continent teeming with champions, from Weah to Drogba, from Yaya Toure to Okocha, from Youssou N'Dour to Wizkid, from Chimamanda to Lupita, from David Adjaye to Idris Elba, from President Ouattara to President Akufo-Addo, from Mo Ibrahim to Aliko Dangote, from Tijan Tia to Akin Adesina. There are African champions everywhere. In sports, there is often a debate between nature and nurture, natural talent as opposed to training, coaching, and hard work. Africa has long been resource-rich and outcome poor. Gold, silver, diamonds, oil, they're all abundant, and yet these resources haven't been enough to lift the continent out of poverty. Perhaps because as African countries focus on natural resources, they've overlooked the most important resource. We believe that Africa's most promising, productive, and transformational natural resource is the continent's youth. Everywhere you look in Africa, people under 21 make up the largest demographic cohort. In some countries, the cohort is greater than 50% of the population. This is the new generation, restless, optimistic, irrepressible, and creative. This is the generation that will define Africa's promise and determine its future. However, what is this generation missing? Mentorship. The youth need an insight into how Aliko Dangote did it. How did Strive do it? How did you do it, Mo? How did Tidjane Thiam become the CEO of Credit Suisse? The greats in the room and across Africa need to mentor our young people. What do you have in common? One thing I'm sure of is determination. Hard work, hard work, hard work. Self-belief, can-do spirit, all the champions have it. Confucius once said, the will to win, the desire to succeed, the urge to reach your full potential, these are the keys that will unlock the door to personal excellence. I can share a minor insight here from a key point that I've learned, and I was just discussing this earlier with Hosh, Mo's son, that since the passing of my dad has taught me that time waits for no man or woman. Time is the most precious commodity we have and we can't control. How we treat time says a great deal about our readiness to take on life itself. My father's timing was absolutely impeccable. 10 a.m. meant 10 a.m. Not 10 past 10, not 10:07, not 10:30, but 10 a.m. If you were meeting him, even as family, you were fearful to be late. I've improved my timing because of that. He simply did not have time to waste, and he would not waste your time, and thus would not tolerate his time being wasted. In Africa today, if you go and see a minister or a very high-level official for a 10 a.m. meeting, he might see you at 2 p.m. And you might feel quite fortunate about that. Others might not see him until 6 p.m. or even the next day. In social events, when we say, come for a party at 8 p.m., folks can stroll in at 11 p.m. as if no issue and no care in the world. We become a product of our environment. The knock-on effect is far more disastrous than we realize, as we waste so much of our productivity waiting or making others wait. The Africa 10 champion Denzel Washington once said, life is like a game of basketball. You have 4 quarters, 0 to 20, first quarter, 20 to 40, second quarter, then it's half time. Third quarter, 40 to 60 is the third quarter, 60 to 80 is the fourth quarter. Anything over 80 is overtime. I will add that if you're very lucky, you get another 10 or 15 years of overtime. But if you're very unlucky, you might not make it to half-time. Injuries can happen at any time from 0 to 80. Some we recover from, some as career-ending. My dad, in typical fashion, bowed out in textbook fashion at 80. He played the game of life to the maximum and achieved very well-deserved global respect. His impact was immeasurable, and he rests in the pantheons of greatness. In tribute to my father, my message to all of us, to my family and my friends, and to my beloved continent is that time is going. Dangote doesn't waste time. Adenuga doesn't waste time. Strive and Mo don't waste time. Bill Gates doesn't waste time. Just a few years ago, I thought I was a young, cool cat. After my dad's passing, it fully dawned on me that I myself am already in the third quarter. We need collective action. We need 10 Kofi Annans. We need 10 Nelson Mandelas, 10 Drogbas, 10 Mo Ibrahims, 10 Strives, 10 Akin Adesina's, 10 Dangotes, 10 Chimamandas, etc., 10 Drogbas. Africa 10, the power of 10, is about creating 10s who go on to create 10 times the impact impact that is exponential and transformational by an order of magnitude. One champion inspires the next. In America, when they had Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they didn't sit still. Jeff Bezos came with Amazon. Zuckerberg is right behind them, and he's still only 35. You have Elon Musk coming. After Jordan, you had Kobe Bryant. And before he retired, LeBron James had already taken over. We need to mentor, inspire, and prepare the next generation of African champions. The talent is there. We have to let them prosper. Barack Obama said, "We did not come to fear the future. We came here to shape it." My father shaped his future in so many ways, not least the Millennium Development Goals, the Global Fund, the Global Compact, literally saving millions of human lives the history will document for decades to come. This was achieved by a remarkable Ghanaian who was able to lead and galvanize collective will. It's now time for us collectively to continue shaping the African future, and fast. We have to become urgent about all we do. The clock is ticking. My father said change is a process which has to be managed. So let's, as Africans and friends of Africa, come together in his honor and manage the change. Change the story of Africa. Change the narrative from poor and impoverished to successful and abundant. Now is the time for action. He taught me to walk with my head held high wherever I am, and my back straight and my chest out. My pride is inside. Not with arrogance, but with an innate self-assurance, as he said himself in one of his more popular quotes. To live is to choose, but to choose well, you must know who you are and what you stand for, where you want to go, and why you want to get there. Another lesser-known quote from him, he said that Africa is a continent that is blessed. We are not a poor continent. We are a very rich continent with lots and lots of poor people. We can do something about this through leadership, through education, through preparation, and through inspiration. Let's ponder and think deeply about that. A very rich continent with lots of poor people. Some years ago, my wife and I were discussing the notion of the Languorous Prefecture. For those who don't know, it was what was historically used to describe Africa. The lazy man's purview, sluggishly slothful, torpid and lethargic. Going back to the beginning of my speech, how can we turn perceived weakness into indisputable strength? In the same vein as my father perfected his French relations upon becoming Secretary General, Roger Federer finally conquered his backhand at the Australian Open a few years ago. His single-handed backhand that had long been ruthlessly targeted as his weakness by Nadal and Djokovic is now a weapon of match-winning destruction. He now plays with a freedom of expression that was never there before. Go for it. Play life without fear. Nike said, just do it, not just think about it. This is the message for Africa. In the era of the fourth industrial revolution, we have to turn our large, youthful, unemployed population into our strength. We have to equip them, educate them, and unleash them. What's important is unity and excellence. Excellence takes work, it takes vision and focus. But we are determined with Africa 10 to prepare the future generation, not only on the field, but as my father said, also give them education and prepare them for their future lives. Excellence is the new cool. Just last week, my wife and I were blessed with a beautiful baby girl to join her two older brothers. Our team is now complete. At that moment that I should have been overjoyed, I was suddenly overwhelmed with sadness as I realized that she would never meet her grandfather. I'm sure he'll be with her and guide her in spirit, but her birth only re-emphasized to me the essence of time. I'm in a rush. My father left me prepared for the future, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. I'm equipped to take responsibility for my family and my children. But how are we leaving the children of Mother Africa? Are they prepared to steer the continent forward? Do they have the tools, the mindset, and the skill set? Are we giving them a chance to win the game of life? The clock is ticking.
Kojo, thank you very much indeed for that tribute and sharing the lessons learned from your father with us. I'm sure he was and would be very proud of you. Now, our next guest is quite literally a rock star, but he's also a very well-known activist. And as co-founder of One, he's lobbied governments all over the world to try to secure better trade deals for Africa, better programs for governments in Africa and the people. And it is, of course, Bono. And Bono, please come up.
Go Kojo. Wow. That was beautiful. Very, very beautiful. Bonsoir, Côte d'Ivoire, Monsieur le Président. I was trying to think if Kofi Annan was a musical instrument, what he would be. And I ended up at the oboe. You know, one of the more murmuring sort of wind instruments, kind of a bass pungi. And I arrived at that position because I thought, Kofi has charmed more than a few snakes in his time. And then I asked myself, if Kofi was a singer, and I thought, what would he be? He'd be a crooner, wouldn't he? I knew he loved Nat King Cole. He's certainly more Bing Crosby than Frank Sinatra. I sang with Frank Sinatra, I was proud to, but he had a voice like a fist. Kofi, I thought, turned fists into open hands and outstretched arms. Kofi's gentle tone, as Zena pointed out, got the whole world to sit forward and listen on the edge of their seat to hear him make sense of some of the madness around him and the din and clangor of all the other voices shouting for attention. We first worked together on Jubilee 2000, Drop the Debt campaign, or as it was known at the World Bank with Mark Brown and the UN, it was known as HIPIC, Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, one of the great acronyms. Myself and Jamie Drummond, who's sitting over there, we handed Kofi the largest petition in the world. It was 21.1 million signatures to a man who is both a committed internationalist and a son of Africa. Kofi said, "This is a check, and I'll take it to the bank." And he did, and we did, and it's a reminder of what social movements can accomplish. $110 billion of bad debts cancelled, helping to get over 50 million more kids in school and allowing formerly indebted countries back control of their economic destiny. Very proud to have done that work with Kofi Annan and with the World Bank. But keeping this more personal and getting back to music, Kofi Annan loved the tenor voice. So I talked 3 Irish tenors into singing for them at Nan's birthday back in the mid-zeros when they visited Dublin. And I made them laugh by explaining to them that my father had described me as a baritone who thinks he's a tenor. And anyway, I thought I'd share with you a story from the scriptures that's always reminded me of Kofi Annan. It's the one about Elijah, who was told to go and find a certain cave on a mountaintop where he would hear God's instructions. So Elijah found the cave, and waited for the voice of God. Then there came a huge storm and the sound of thunder. Ah, thought Elijah, this must be the voice of God. He went to the entrance of the cave, but God didn't show. He returned into the darkness and waited. Lightning flashed at the back of the cave. Ah, thought Elijah, illumination. It must be the voice of God. But again, he was disappointed. Next came the rain spilling from the heavens. A big smile from Elijah. Of course, the voice of God will wash over me like rain. He went to the entrance of the cave to be disappointed for the third time. Not just disappointed, crushed. Elijah sat depressed at the back of the cave, questioning his own sanity. He was just staring into the middle distance when a gentle breeze almost imperceptibly entered the cave. It was, of course, the voice of God. And isn't that the lesson? Sometimes it's the quietest voice that weighs the most. Kofi's life was to make sense of storms, to make sense after the rains had passed, after the thunder had shaken the ground and the lightning blinded the eyes of the world. When Kofi passed away, President Nana Akufo-Addo, just across the way in Ghana, said, "Rest in perfect peace, Kofi. You have earned it." And Kofi did earn it, perfect peace. But for those of us here on earth, the best we can hope for, the most we can work for, is an imperfect peace. But that, Kofi Annan showed us, is a very, very high calling. It was his life's work, and it must remain ours. Thank you, Kofi.
Thank you very much indeed, Bono. Well, we don't have Bono to sing, but we have Jahel Bonnet to sing, an incredible Ivorian performer who exploded onto the music scene with her debut album last year. She's a self-proclaimed musical alchemist, mixing up African rhythms with jazz, hip-hop and soul. Jahel, where are you? Please give her a round warm of applause.
Amumoni Ballet. Welcome, Makwaba. Amumoni Ballet. Welcome, Makwaba. Amumoni Ballet. Amumoni Ballet. Ici. Amumoni Ballet. Gentleman, oh gentleman, gentleman, gentleman. Ton arrivée m'a rendu fier. Ce souffle a éteint les bougies de mes prières. Comme Sundata, je t'ai confié au ciel. Comblé comme toi, quitter mon sein. Même si tu portes ces gènes, ton destin lié au mien. You have to be a real gentleman. Oh, comme si pomme, c'est toi comme un homme. Si tu veux être un vrai bonhomme, alors devine la démarche d'une femme. Be a gentleman quand ça dit back on big bobby. Quand ça dit back on big bobby. Who a good guy, some big man. Who a good guy, some big man. That's some big man. Oh. le sens de mes paroles, car c'est la clé de ton devenir. Si tu as des doutes, pose-moi des questions, car c'est comme ça qu'on construit son horizon. Baby, l'humilité n'a jamais tué personne. Si tu persévères, à coup si t'en en sors, n'attends pas de persévérer, ni de faire présent. Assume tes erreurs dans la douleur. Et si on te dit qu'un homme t'apprend pas, que ce sont que les femmes, c'est que c'est pas de là qu'est sortie la femme. Ooh, gentleman, gentleman, gentleman. Oh, gentleman, gentleman, gentleman. Oh, gentleman, gentleman, gentleman. Oh, gentleman. Cause I see back on the property. Who okay? That's something, man. That's something, man. That's something, man. Yeah, something, man. Des mêmes de granit, des bancs à Fonteco. Voici les pas du roi Margot, la maçon bébalo. Je suis à ce que ça donne, papa redoute sa tête. Quand j'en veux savoir, quand ben cherche une poulette. I'm telling you, money runs the world. Talking about Sika. On dit qu'il a corrompu son âme. Hey. C'est le tune, tape ses égaux. Pendant elle est bien, n'a follow bolo, n'a follow jiggy, yeah. Money. Tes canons bombent le torse sur les champs de bataille. Les haillons tombent comme du bétail. Les canons bombent le torse sur les champs de bataille. Les haillons tombent comme du bétail. Talking about Sika. J'aimerais remercier ce soir les autorités.
I would like to tonight thank the Ivorian authorities and the foundation Mo Ibrahim. I'm going to end with the song from my album called Defleme, meaning my name is.
Say Beflemi jae Beflemi jae Beflemi jae Ha jae Mami uni après un pas. Non, y'a qui nous tant qu'il veut, car le chemin paraît d'or est jonché d'épines. Non coco, don't to worry, que j'écoute la voix de ce cœur qui bat dans ma poitrine, que je m'agrippe à cet infime espoir. Non, je suis là, mes flammes, c'est l'amour, oh la fille, boba soup, and so coming of the darkness, blably. Gabon, bien, oh nous, I don't care how anything. Je porterai haut la voix de ce peuple au-delà de l'océan, de l'air et du temps. Sorti des entrailles d'une guérilla, de mes doigts, j'arracherai toutes ces liens of stars. Eva.
I'm an instant fan. That was fantastic, wasn't it? So Jahel sang 3 songs there. The first one was to her little son, telling him to grow up with all the right values and so on, and a reflection there of course, the man we're remembering. And then the second one was about money, singing also in French, but also in her native Baoulé. And, you know, money's important in life, she was saying, but it's not the only thing that's important. And at the end, she was just saying, Je suis Jahel, I am Jahel. Terrific, absolutely wonderful. And remember, of course, this is a celebration of Kofi Annan's life. We're remembering him, but we're also celebrating the man we all knew. And he loved to dance, didn't he? So he really would have enjoyed that, because I remember he was the last person on the dance floor in Geneva last year at his 80th birthday. So was I. And somebody else who was there is Mark Malloch Brown, Lord Malloch Brown, indeed, who, of course, was Kofi Annan's Chief of Staff and also Deputy Secretary General under Kofi before he abandoned the dizzy heights of the United Nations in New York for the Parliament in the United Kingdom as a Minister for Africa in the United Nations. Mark Malloch Brown. My Lord.
Well, thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. President, Mr. Presidents, Madam President, Madam Deputy Secretary General, Excellencies, friends, Kojo. What a wonderful tribute we've paid to your father this evening. I'm going to start with something that a number of you in this room have heard me say, and it's eccentric then and it's eccentric now. I like to say that I pray that in my next life I will be born a Ghanaian. And I say it because of all the decency, courtesy and integrity that I learnt from the great Ghanaian I worked for, and through him, of course, and just through a life in international affairs where for a long time I often thought there were more Ghanaians in the UN than there were in Ghana. I saw these same attributes so widely reflected across a wonderful group of people. But Kofi was their natural leader, and one reason for that was for all of us, and so many in this room will know it. He only had to meet you twice, and suddenly he would be asking about your children, your spouse. For me, friendship wove from early days of walking at Lake Lama in Geneva, he with a cigar in his mouth, asking me how I was doing in my UN High Commissioner for Refugees field jobs that I would occasionally come back to Geneva from. He kept up with me when I was in the UN, when I was out. Much later on, when I was back as his deputy and before that as head of UNDP, he chided me sweetly with that wonderful humour for not knowing Kojo when to stop, because I went on and had a fourth child. And he gleefully asked the head of the UN Fund for Population Activities whether it was appropriate for the head of UNDP to have 4 children. Fortunately, Trish and I had left it long enough that we got away with it. Apparently, our spacing was impeccable. But Kofi would love to tease us, and then went on to be godfather to that youngest goddaughter, and showed my youngest daughter exactly the same kindnesses he'd shown me, tea when he was in London, wonderful presents that would arrive unexpectedly. And so many of us in this room would have the same stories of that extraordinary way he reached out. But I saw him not just in those good, affectionate times, but of course in the difficult times, the times of Iraq and much else that were the darker side of his period as Secretary General. And I cannot help but observe that the two individuals who, to me, were most comfortable, most sure of themselves, most decent in their integrity throughout that whole sorry episode were Kofi and Colin Powell. And I could not help but think of these two men of the same generation, that one brought up in a just shortly to be post-colonial Gold Coast, the other in Queens, New York, that both of them were of a generation that were toughened by the slights and prejudices that they had to put up with in their youth. But they emerged from it men of such substance and integrity that, compared to the sons of the traditional political elites of Britain and America that led us into such difficulties on Iraq, one saw extraordinary leadership from them both. And of course, Kofi, saint though he was in many ways, was a good man in a bad neighborhood, because that's the world the UN is. And he had this wonderful African proverb. I sometimes wonder whether his African proverbs was quite as original or authentic as he would claim. Sometimes they seem just too convenient to make a point. But one was, you cannot change the wind, but you can bend the sail. And that was always Kofi's way, to work through crises to try and find not the perfect outcome, but the best possible outcome, while never betraying the principles that he'd brought to his office. So whether it was in the horrifically difficult circumstances of Darfur or the DRC or the Middle East or the whole issue of Iran, or earlier during the very great difficulties he faced as head of peacekeeping with Rwanda and Bosnia, Rwanda just this weekend to celebrate, or remember rather, the 25 years since its genocide. In all, he showed a willingness to learn, an honesty, a willingness to, for the UN and himself, be very open about what had gone wrong and the lessons learned. And it made him, as we went forward, a UN which therefore had some 20 peacekeeping operations by the time he left office, and Jean-Marie Guéno, who is here, led that department for him. But it didn't, of course, stop with this extraordinary role in the world of peacemaking and peacekeeping. You've heard how, whether it was in the area of human rights, in development and the Millennium Development Goals, in public health with the Global Fund, in the area of business responsibility with the Global Compact. This was a Secretary General who took advantage of a brief period of opportunity after 1989 and before, in a sense, the dark clouds broke after 9/11, to be the most innovative of Secretary Generals that the organization has, I would argue, ever seen. And then we come to the post-UN years, to, as Mo said, the way he picked up an extraordinary role in Kenya. He went back to being the mediator himself, not directing others as mediators, but just patiently putting the sides together. The role he played in establishing AGRA and the Green Revolution for Africa that mattered so much to him, working with Dr. Adesina and Strive Masiwa and others. His role here at the Mo Ibrahim Foundation as awarding those first prizes, championing, as you heard, a theory of how you could reward and celebrate successful government in Africa. And indeed, when Mo first came to see us on the 38th floor of the UN, at the time Kofi had already had this concept, but the other way round. What could we give bad leaders to make them step down from office? And he kept on coming to me as head of UNDP and saying, couldn't we set up a fund to reward bad leaders to make them retire? So I had a huge relief when Mo showed up with the opposite version of the idea, a much more plausible and successful one to make happen, as quickly Kofi was the first to recognize. So this son of Africa, as we've all called him tonight, who has brought such hope and opportunity to this continent, who made it so much the center of his time as Secretary General, as I saw, as his direct head of UNDP. This is a man whose first speech to African leaders at the first OAU summit he attended in Harare, in that quiet, gentle voice we've heard so much of tonight, talked to them about the need to be accountable to their people, to respect human rights, to respect democracy, and above all, to respect term limits. Already that quiet, gentle voice was speaking truth to power. That summit was in Harare, where at least I think the host was rather skeptical of that message. We've heard reference to the state funeral that Kofi was given in Ghana, an extraordinary acknowledgement of the role of this man in the world, this citizen of Ghana, this son of Kumasi, their most famous citizen. And may I end, therefore, as I began, and with the greatest respect to President Ouattara, our host, I'm sure he will allow me to say that for tonight at least, let us all be Ghanaians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. And indeed, you mention our host there, President Alassane Ouattara, who, of course, has welcomed us to... President Ouattara, I'd stay on your feet, sir, Your Excellency, because I'd like to invite you onto the stage to make your presentation, because we're all enjoying this wonderful country of yours. I only arrived last night, but I'm very impressed by Abidjan. Wonderful, real powerhouse of West Africa, isn't it? And we know that in recent years, Côte d'Ivoire has seen... Ça va, merci bien. Oui, je comprends mieux que je parle. Mais in recent years, Côte d'Ivoire has seen such a wonderful, steady improvement on the Ibrahim Index of African governance, and that's a great testament to your leadership and guidance.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Je remercie ma sœur Zainab Badawi.
I would like to thank dear Zainab Badawi, Excellencies, the former head of state and head of government. I have a list here that has about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I think Mo Ibrahim is trying to send me a message. So I am very happy to welcome my dear brothers and sisters. Thanks for being here tonight. And we are particularly honored to have you here with us. Mrs. the Vice Secretary General of the United Nations, Mrs. Nadia Machel Mandela, Mr. the Vice President of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, dear friends, dear brothers, dear friend Ibrahim, thank you, President Mo, for agreeing to host this weekend here in Abidjan, and I would like to say how honored we are to have you, to host you guys here for this weekend. And my dear nephew, son of Kofi Annan, ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, it is with a real pleasure that I welcome you in Abidjan for the 2019 edition of the Mo Ibrahim Weekend, which has as a theme the African migration, the youth, employment, and mobility. I would like to wish you to all our traditional akwaba, meaning welcome to Côte d'Ivoire. Our warm welcome to my brothers and sisters, former presidents, which honor us with their presence to be part of this forum. And I would also like to thank all of their collaborators to be present. I would also like to thank the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and its president, also its council, for choosing Côte d'Ivoire to host this world-renowned event, which would allow us to focus on questions related to Africa's development. This 2019 edition, which is focused on the migration issues on the continent, is particularly pertinent regarding our current situation and what our countries are going through. I would like to then congratulate Dr. Mo Ibrahim for his involvement and commitment in favoring good governance in Africa. Indeed, the Mo Ibrahim Prize and the Ibrahim Index of Good Governance have imposed themselves as extremely important and in the area of improving governance in the African continent. Côte d'Ivoire has started working on very ambitious reforms in order to strengthen governance and transparency in public management. Now, all these efforts have shown an improvement from Côte d'Ivoire in the Mo Ibrahim Index, that Côte d'Ivoire went from the 42nd place to the 22nd place. Thank you very much. That is the highest progress recorded up to 2018, and I was telling Ibrahim that we have 2 more years to move 19 more places to be on the first place until 2020. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we will have the opportunity to exchange on the central theme of this event, specifically on governance in Africa, as part of the panel that I'm going to be part of with Dr. Mo tomorrow afternoon. For now, I would like to thank the Mo Ibrahim Foundation for the great honor that they've done to my country, giving us the opportunity to give a warm tribute to our dear friend Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations, Nobel Prize of Peace, and an honorable son of Africa. He's also a brother next door. He's a humanitarian and a great diplomat. He would have been very proud of the quality of this event and this assembly for the 2019 Mo Ibrahim Forum on Migration, Youth and Mobility. These issues having been part of his personal fights. He and I have talked about those issues quite often, not only in Geneva but also in Abidjan. Kofi Annan was more than a friend for Côte d'Ivoire. He was also a son of our country. He was a brother who shared, the pain of Côte d'Ivoire through the political and military crisis that Côte d'Ivoire went through. But with his optimisms, he put all of his diplomatic talent to encourage Côte d'Ivoire and push us towards the research of a Pacific solution. The name Kofi Annan is tightly linked to the return of peace and security in our country. We owe him the involvement and the strong mobilization of the international community to close to the Ivorian people. He was determined not to let our country sink, and he did not hesitate one bit to use the authority of the United Nations and his exceptional ability for negotiation to conclude the agreement of Inas Marcoussis in order to start the first step towards the end of the crisis and the beginning of peace and stability after a memorable meeting that we had with him in Yamoussoukro. To show our gratitude, I really wanted us to show a tribute. So during the presidency of Côte d'Ivoire at the Security Council of the United Nations, we decided to give him a tribute, and we particularly insisted on his exceptional contribution to peace and security in the world, and also his humanitarian aspect. The United Nations owes him a lot, particularly its prestigious aspect after the Wall of Berlin fall. He also helps reinvent multilateralism, and thanks to his courage, his political courage, and the strength of his moral authority and his conviction, he gave member states a reason to believe in the United Nations and multilateralism, regardless of the size of the country. The United Nations are, for all of us, a common house. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, the world has lost a strong defender of peace, somebody who had the ability to peacefully resolve issues. Kofi Annan has been amazing in the job that he has done so far. All of his reforms and everything that he initiated, even all of the stakes regarding developments for African countries, also for instance, the Millennium Summit in 2000, the agreement on the development for ONBs. These are some of his very important successes, something that he worked on tirelessly in order to fight against inequality and the ability for everyone to have access to education. Also, the fight against AIDS, HIV. The action of Kofi Annan at the head of the United Nations allowed the world to have a different view of Africa, regarding Africa as now a place of opportunity, and to really put all of Africa's issues at the heart of the agenda, even when all the future provision showed dire consequences. So I would like to invite Africa, especially African youth, to really admire everything that he has done, especially his role on the international scene and his humanitarian aspect. All those elements must inspire African youth, our young diplomats, and all of those who participate in the building of Africa. Kofi Annan was a major stakeholder and actor of our time. His wisdom, his voice will be missed. Like I mentioned in front of the Security Council in New York on the 5th of December, his elegance, his wisdom, his courtesy, his humanity are very dearly missed. I would like to tell his spouse, in the name of my spouse, Mrs. Dominique, since she was not able to be present today, and to his children, Kojo, Nina, and Ama, I would say that Kofi will always remain a guide for the current and future generation. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you very much.
Restez ici, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le Président, pour les photographes avec les autres. Thank you so much for that wonderful speech and renewed gratitude for your hosting us here. Before our final performance, we have some music at the end. I'd like to welcome to the stage for some photographs, very special group, the Ibrahim laureates, former President of His Excellency is remaining affected. The photographs are here. Yes, so the former President of Mozambique, Joaquim Chissano, if you could come up, former President of Botswana, Festus Mogae, former President of Cabo Verde, Pedro Pires, and former President of Namibia, Hifikepunye Pohamba, and the former President of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And may I invite our other speakers, please? Amina, Mark, Kojo, Mo, of course. All of you, if you could join the stage for the photographs. And then we have our final music performance, so please stay sitting. Couldn't remove it. Thank you. So, good. Group photo finished. So we've had a more contemplative evening than we usually do, reflecting, of course, on the loss of a great African and a great global statesman, Kofi Annan. And we're now going to be kicking off for tomorrow the discussions. I hope they'll be very fruitful, as I'm sure they will be all the time. And now we have another Congolese artist, superstar, philanthropist, Fally Ipupa. But from me, it's been my pleasure. Goodbye.
Bonsoir, bonsoir. Natango na la mwaka na kimsala. Nita na nyumba makana. Ata na popa kama songa kanda koyo. Yo sala fete lo na. Aseli, 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 aseli. Combat de tous les jours. Parfois je suis sûr, parfois je doute. La vie est belle, la vie est douce. Combat de tous les jours. Parfois je suis sûr, parfois je doute. Sweet life, sweet things, big dream things, big don't dream forever. You know my life is that easy. I give my life too sexy. That the region chicks like me. Okay, see I've been dreaming, now I'm living. Never stop hustling. Okay, champagne, Magnon, Easter, bling bling, Caro, sexy sexy girl. Combat toujours, parfois je suis sûr, parfois je doute. Ibrahim, la vie est belle, la vie est douce. Combat de tous les jours, parfois je suis sûr, parfois je doute. Nigga fly, nigga first class. Nakonanga sei moko mwa mama. Nakonanga sei moko mwa chérie. Nakoboma mwana yo moko mwa mama. Je m'appelle Fally Ipupa du Cap La Merveille de la RDC. Merci à la Fondation Mo Ibrahim pour cette invitation. On est ensemble. La vie est belle, la vie est douce. Combat toujours, combat de tous les jours. Parfois je suis sûr, parfois je doute. La vie est belle, la vie est douce. Combat toujours, combat de tous les jours. Parfois je suis sûr, parfois je doute. Ma chérie, ma chérie, ma maman, ma maman. Oh, nalela maman, ndako nanga si moko mwa chéri, ndako nanga bolingo moko mwa mama yeye olele. Alela mama, alela chéri yeye bébé à moi, alela malka nikele, alela mama bébé na.
Tacos, merci.
Ma chérie, elle a des secrets dans le cœur. Ma chérie, elle a des regrets, des rancœurs. Oh, ma chérie, elle parle doucement, doucement. Ma chérie, n'aime pas les mouvements, mouvements. Mais j'aimerais l'emmener, l'emmener, l'emmener. J'aimerais l'emmener, l'emmener, l'emmener. Mais j'aimerais l'emmener, l'emmener, l'emmener. Pourtant, ma chérie, elle veut me sortir de son cœur. Je t'ai donné mon cœur, et maintenant c'est la vie. Ya mama ye ye, oh lele. Maleke ya nzambe, oh lele. Maleke ya nzambe, oh lele.
À la maison, le petit nom qui laisse danser. Attends pour les toute la journée sur les gens, une fois, c'est quoi qu'on s'en pour les. Si c'est comme ça, je vais tout seul avec faire des aussi. Elle se passe un peu chez le voisin, j'évite d'un peu voisin. Je crois à lui dans l'homme des riches. Et bien, je suis ta mère, elle en est riche. Et bien, amen, c'est Dieu qui donne. Et bien, amen, c'est Dieu qui donne.
Je t'ai donné mon cœur, et maintenant c'est la vie. Ya mama ye ye, oh lele. Maleke ya nzambe, maleke ya nzambe, je t'ai donné mon cœur, et maintenant c'est la vie. Je pouvais te suivre jusqu'au bout de la terre. C'était mon mannequin, mannequin ya nzambe, mannequin. Et passo. La fondation Ibrahim sur les autres fondations. I'll get up and dance. Africa vient danser, Europa vient danser, America l'aide, Sud-America como esta, Asia, Haïti. Et pas Abidjan, on s'enjaille. Dans la Yaoundé, Makosa. Libreville, Oriento. Angola, Bondia. Dakar, oh, Marie-Jeanne, Polo, 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 Polo. Marie-Jeanne, Polo, Ababa, Ketuma. Abuna, Mota, 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 Lala. Marie-Jeanne, Polo, Ababa, Ketuma. Abuna, Mota. La chose est là. Ototombe. Yangoyo. Mongambo yango yo, yango yo. Mongambo yango yo, yango yo. Yango yako luba o yango yo. Elokwele kidiama yango yo. Esoma pamituka o eloko yo. Esoma balopango eloko yo. Foto simana tobe oleko yo. Eloko ya monini e misiki. Eloko ya monini e misiki. Nalela o biso yo. Makolo kono biso yo. Nalela o biso yo. Makolo kono biso yo. Eloko eleki diamaya. Lord. Lego, 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 Lego. Le 2 juillet, bisous de Ménavois. Le 2 juillet, bisous de Ménavois. Le 2 juillet, bisous de Ménavois. Lego, 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 Lego. Moya oye, moya oye, moya oye, moya oye. diamant yando esoma bami tukao eloko lotelangi ndobene loko yo ndoma kanto esila obene loko yo eloko yango nini ebisiki eloko yango nini ebisiki nalela obiso yo bakolongo na obiso yo nalela obiso yo bakolongo na obiso yo eloko eleki diamaya loda lego 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 le 2 juillet biso tembe na foi le 2 juillet biso tembe na foi le 2 juillet biso tembe na foi lego lego el profesor école.
El rey mago. Yoga bien. Segue, Walona Basel. Rei mago. Merci.